Penn State position previews for 2019 next on Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. All right, we're talking about Penn State football. We got Tim Aiden on the line for Black Shoe Diaries. We are running through all the positions for 2019. Quarterback, Tim, of course, has been a position that's been very stable for this team with one of the more dynamic players in college football, one of the more dynamic, explosive players and interesting and fun players to watch in the history of Penn State football, Trace McSorley. Before that, Christian Hackenberg. The quarterback position has been very stable for quite some time. This might be the year when there are a lot of unknown factors in the quarterback room, and one of those is a byproduct of Tommy Stevens moving on unexpectedly.
Yeah, so at this time last year, we all thought that Tommy Stevens would be the guy that we'd all be ready to rally behind going into the 2019 season, but unfortunately, he suffered an injury towards the end of last season, which he needed surgery for, and that caused him to miss the Citrus Bowl against Kentucky. And actually, when Trace went down at one point for a brief bit, it was Sean Clifford who came in and played a few snaps, and he even threw a pretty little deep ball, which resulted in a drop, of course, which summarizes the receiving corps in 2018 performance. So, but then Stevens unfortunately was not able to practice at all in the spring. That's where the whole transfer thing began. Wasn't able to get. Well, I say Clifford was able to get some important reps, working with the first teamers, while Stevens was still sidelined of his injury. And of course, he was the main quarterback at the spring game, the blue-white game, and he put on a pretty strong performance. He showed a really strong and accurate arm. I think that's the one thing he brings. If there's anything that he's going to be, I think he's clearly better than Trace in, it's the passing department. And that's not to knock on Trace in the least bit, but he definitely has better physical attributes. But digressing for a second, but that combined the fact Tommy wasn't able to play in the spring game, it gave the coaching staff, a tough decision to make. They couldn't just promise Tommy, you're a starting guy. You've got it. Sean has played well in the spring, but you're our main man. It just couldn't. It just wouldn't have been fair to Sean to do that. They had to have and the staff is all about competition. They're always about, they're not ones to just hand someone the starting position. They have, no matter how talented they are, they have to consistently keep it and earn it. So they weren't about to just hand Tommy the starting job. And so they basically emphasized to him, look, you're going to have to battle it out in the, over the summer and the fall with Sean. And of course, Tommy, this being his last year of eligibility, he needs, and him never having started a game, having a very small highlight reel to show to NFL scouts, he really does need to, find a place where he's going to be able to be the man, be the starter. And for him, he didn't feel like Penn State was that place. Now he's over at Mississippi State, reunited with his old offensive coordinator, Joe Moorhead. So we'll see if he can grab a starting job there and have himself a really good year. Wish him nothing but the best. But, it is a testament, though, to how well Clifford did during the spring, that the staff was willing to have this be an open competition. And for the record, they aren't handing Clifford the job either. I mean, they've stated that they're going to make it they're going to give Will Levis, the current backup, a chance to try and, beat him out. But it's highly unlikely. It's pretty much, it's all but set in stone at this point, though, that Clifford is going to be the starter, but they're not just going to hand it to him. He's going to have to earn it. I think he shouldn't have a problem earning it. Clifford, I think you're going to remember him best if you watched Penn State all last year, you might remember him best for throwing a 95-yard touchdown bomb to Daniel George, which was the longest in garbage time against Kent State, which was the longest touchdown pass in Penn State history. And he also threw a lovely deep ball in his first snap of the game in the 51-6 blowout against Pitt in the rain. So we've seen glimpses of his arm. And I think the other thing to address about Clifford, he's labeled as a pro-style guy, and he's, so people – and I think also whereas Christian Hackenberg's number, maybe some people might have a misconception that he's a statue, he can't run at all. That's not the case. He does not have the wheels of Trace or Tommy, admittedly, but he is a guy who, when he needs to, he can take off and scramble. He showed it in the spring game, and apparently, from what I've been reading in articles, he's been working on trying to make himself more of a dual threat kind of guy. So I could see him potentially making some opposing defenses pay for underestimating his running ability.
Now, from an outside view, it appears as though Tommy Stevens' decision might have been a little bit more emotional than logical in regards to how he was handled, and the situation was handled in a situation in which he may have assumed he was going to be the starter. And then, obviously, as you mentioned, he was hurt, not able to compete in the spring. Sean Clifford plays really well after showing some flashes last season, and it becomes a competition of sorts. So he's going to run into the same thing in Mississippi State. He doesn't have the job there, but it was a logical move for him to make to reunite with his former offensive coordinator, Joe Moorhead there. Sean Clifford. So the one statement that you made that may surprise people that don't follow and watch Penn State week to week to week is to say that the downfield passing will improve with Sean Clifford over one of the marquee names in the history of the program, Trace McSorley.
Yeah, I do think that's one of the things you will see an improvement in. And again, it's not to knock Trace. He definitely could make some throws at times, and he was also hurt, in fairness to him. But the one thing they always said about Trace was, the one thing they always talked about with Trace was his attitude and his, just his grit and what he. And those are things that you usually attribute to a guy who doesn't quite have all the typical physical tools of a person in that position, but Clifford, he came in with a pedigree for having those physical tools. There's nobody is questioning, his ability to throw the ball. The only thing that's, I think, being underestimated right now about him is just his running ability. So yeah, I think that's the difference you're going to see. I think the other thing is too, obviously, the whole leadership thing. Now, no one's going to replace Trace's leadership or his ability to rally the troops. But with that being said, I read a very interesting thing. I think when the media was interviewing the rising sophomore, the guys who were fresh on the team last year, like Micah Parsons, Justin Shorter, and them, and I believe it was a quote from Micah Parsons, said something like, to the extent I'm paraphrasing, but when Tommy left, transferred out, Sean Clifford, I guess in the locker room, Sean Clifford got up and said some of the lines like, we're not going to regress at the quarterback position. And, and the guys in the room got pretty fired up about that. So it sounds as if, Sean's already winning over the locker room, and that's a big start right there. And actually his leadership thing is something that's kind of overlooked as well, because he was either the first or second. He was one of the first. He might have been the very first commit, actually. I'll have to look this up. But I believe he was the very first commitment in the 2017 recruiting class for Penn State. He committed, I think, before the start of his junior year of high school. So, and he tried, from that point on, he was like the point man for trying to help recruit others into that 17 class. So I think he's the kind of kid who can, if he can win over the team, and it sounds like he's on his way to doing that. You bring that in with his physical tools. I think this is a kid who's gonna surprise a lot of non-Penn Staters, just casual observers of college football.
I am tempted to go to YouTube and look up the cut down version of the Citrus Bowl game against Kentucky and find that throw, because I watched that game, but I was watching like 3 games at the same time, and I distinctly remember Trace getting shaken up and knocked out of that game for a few plays. Don't remember the throw that Clifford made, and as you mentioned, it becomes forgettable when the guy drops the ball and it's not a play that was made. Had it become a 40 or 50-yard pass completion, I probably would have remembered it, but I like to go back and see him make some of the throws that he made downfield last season with only 7 attempts, 5 completions. So I will tell you this, Tim, for sure. If he is able to maintain a 399.7 quarterback rating, and that's what he had last year in 7 attempts with 5 completions at 28 yards per attempt, he will be the best quarterback in the country if he can maintain that. But let's understand that a good quarterback rating somewhere in the 120 to 150 range. McSorley was at 124, so that's going to be kind of difficult to do. We got Tim Aiden on the line breaking down Penn State football position by position as we get you set for 2019. Of course, help us build the channel by grabbing the Amazon link in the description section below and doing your shopping right there. We've just finished a live stream on Patreon at the Voice of College Football Community, so please join us right there. 2 exclusive live streams per week where I react to your comments. We've received over 36,000 this year, 36,000 comments from you. I react to your comments. The other live stream is I bring you, the fan, the viewer, part of our community, on to talk college football each and every week.